You're looking at a view of NASA's Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft. The launch pad ahead of the agency's Artemis II test flight that will send a crew of 4 astronauts around the moon and back. I'm Rachel Kraft from NASA's Office of Communications, and welcome to our briefing today to preview rollout and the Artemis II mission. We're joined today by several NASA managers here to share more about how those preparations are going for the mission. And they are John Honeycutt, Chair of the Artemis II Mission Management Team, Charlie Blackwell-Thompson, Artemis Launch Director, Jeff Radigan, Lead Flight Director for Artemis II, Lily Villarreal, Landing and Recovery Director for the mission, and Jacob Bleacher, Chief Exploration Scientist for NASA's Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate. We'll have some opening remarks from each of our participants, and then we'll get into questions and answers. And we'll take those questions from those here in the room and those joining us by phone. And with that, we'll start with you, John.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Hey, happy to be here today. You know, these are the kind of days that we live for, and when you do the kind of work that we do, the rocket and the spacecraft, Orion, integrity, getting ready to go to the pad and rolling to the pad. This group of folks to my left, as well as many others across the agency, are here. We're here representing a lot of folks that have done a lot of work to get us to where we are today. I'll just say it really doesn't get much better than this, and we're making history. I was around for Artemis I, and this one, I think for us, and I know probably for you too, this one feels a lot different. Putting crew on the rocket and taking the crew around the moon. This is going to be our first step toward a sustained lunar presence on the moon. So it's 10 days, 4 astronauts going further from Earth than any other humans ever traveled. We'll be validating Orion spacecraft's life support, navigation, crew systems in the really harsh environments of deep space, and that's going to pave the way for future landings. Talk a little bit about the mission management team. That's a group of 15 core members from across the enterprise that are responsible for the overall risk management associated with the mission. Myself, as well as the members of the mission management team, have taken part in every one of the mission reviews and all the risk assessments that we've done to date so far. Right now, the mission manager, who is different from me, he's running the show relative to the overall Moon to Mars mission management for Artemis II, and he's the deputy for me as a mission management chair. And then when we get to the L-2 day mark, all of his responsibility relative to managing the mission will get turned over to me and the mission management team. Once we're flying, the MMT is going to be providing strategic direction for the operation teams, whether it be Charlie and her team leading up to launch, or Jeff and his team for the in-space operations. Shortly after we launch and get into proximity operations demonstration on launch day, we'll begin to meet daily at JSC throughout the mission. Now, as chair of the MMT, I got one job, and it's a safe return of Reed and Victor and Christina and Jeremy. I consider that a duty and a trust. And it's one I intend to see through. Alongside the MMT Deputy Chair, who I mentioned earlier, and the entire MMT. So to that end, I will tell you, we're going to fly when we're ready. From launch through the mission days to follow, the crew safety is going to be our #1 priority. Thank you. Rachel.
Charlie.
Hi, well, good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Blackwell Thompson. I'm the Artemis Launch Director. It is wonderful to be in this room because when I'm here with all of you, it means that there's a milestone upon us, and we are approaching a big one for us as it relates to Artemis II tomorrow. You can see from the picture that was put up earlier, and I think we have another graphic, all of the platforms in the vehicle assembly building are retracted. We are on track for our rollout tomorrow morning. First motion is planned for 7 a.m. And many of our teams will be coming back in on third shift to make those final preparations and get ready to roll, like I said, at first motion. 7 a.m. Takes us a little while to get out of the building, but about an hour after we get that first motion, you'll begin to see this beautiful vehicle cross over the threshold of the VAB and come outside for the world to have a look. We'll retract the crew access arm. That'll take a little bit of time, about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll pick up and we'll head out on our 4-mile journey to Launch Complex 39B. We'll be at a cruising speed of just under 1 mile per hour. It'll be a little slower around the turns and up the hill, and that journey will take us about 8 to 10 hours to get there. Once we get out to the pad, we'll begin and get hard down. We'll begin our connects to the facility, connecting our commodities, getting through our validations, getting connected back up to the firing room. We'll get prepared to power up the elements. We have some crew access arm swings that are going to happen out at the pad. When we first get out there, we've got emergency egress system to configure. We'll get ready for our pad testing, which is called pad PSET. It's a lot of our RF checkouts that we do. And we'll do our booster servicing, and we will get ready for wet dress. We do have a walk down with the crew called CDDT Part 2. It's a walk down of the emergency egress system once it's configured. We'll take care of that somewhere in and around our preps for wet dress is the plan right now based on the crew schedule. In wet dress, we'll fully tank that vehicle. We'll go through all of our tanking ops. We'll go through our day of launch configuration, and provided everything's nominal, the launch director, myself, I'll make the decision to send the closeout crew out to the pad, and we will do the final closeouts for launch. We'll go through our terminal count, and we have a planned cutoff at T-minus 29 seconds. We'll take some time after wet dress. We'll review the data, and then we'll set up for our launch attempt. Launch day will be pretty similar to wet dress. There'll be 2 big differences. One is that we're going to send the crew to the pad, and the other one is we're not going to stop at 29 seconds for a planned stop. So that's a little bit about our road to wet dress, what's entailed in wet dress. Again, launch will come along after that. We talked about, I think at our prior briefing, a little bit about our countdown, leveraged off the Artemis I countdown. I do have a couple of changes in our holds in the countdown. We have 3 planned for Artemis II. You know, just like we do on launch day, right? Part of launch, we'll get into our terminal count. We'll count down. As I said, don't plan to stop at 29 seconds. Plan to go all the way to T0. We'll get down to core stage engine start inside of 6 seconds, six-ish seconds, booster ignition and liftoff. And at that point in time, I'll hand off to the Ascent Flight Director, just like I'm going to do today when I hand off to my colleague here as part of the briefing, Mr. Jeff Radigan.
Thanks, Charlie. It's a great day to be here talking to you all. You know, over in Mission Control, of course, we're doing our final simulations, getting ready. The crew has undergone all of their final training and is wrapping things up. You can see in the video here that, as Charlie mentioned, we get liftoff, and then the core stage and boosters are going to take us to orbit. And it's going to be a monumental day. We're really looking forward to it. Let's see, so I will talk through a little bit of just an overview of the mission. Of course, we'll get the boosters jettisoning there a couple minutes into launch, and then the core stage will boost the upper stage, ICPS, and the Orion spacecraft into orbit. At that point, we'll actually separate from the core stage, and then go ahead and deploy the Orion solar arrays, setting ourselves up into a low Earth orbit to start. We'll spend a couple hours in low Earth orbit, and then the upper stage will do the apogee rays burn that will take us into a high Earth orbit, where we'll spend about 24 hours checking out the Orion systems, life support systems, crew systems, ensuring everything's ready. Along the way, we're going to do a ProxOps demo, and see, once this video completes, we'll cue the ProxOps demo video. And the crew's going to get a chance to fly the Orion spacecraft for the first time around the upper stage, and that's going to be great for us. I mentioned the crew readiness. They're undergone all of their training, and I Reed, Victor, Jeremy, and Christina, they're all ready to get on the rocket and get on with the mission. It's one of the interesting things. I don't think they can get enough training. You always want more, to the point where we're actually installing, I think, their cockpit in quarantine, so they'll be able to do some last-minute training. But from my perspective, they're ready to go. Here you can see a video of the ProxOps demo of what we're going to do. We're actually going to separate. We're going to turn Orion around, and then the crew is going to pilot the spacecraft around the upper stage, the ICPS. This is what is going to give us data to ensure that we can dock on future flights. We're all looking forward to being able to dock with a Starship in the future, or a Blue lander. And on Artemis II, we're going to ensure that all of our models, all of our systems work successfully to be able to do those future dockings as we're in that high Earth orbit and doing a checkout. Let's see, after we get into that high Earth orbit and we do the checkout, of course, we'll consult with Mr. Honeycutt and the mission management team, make sure all systems are go for the translunar injection burn, and we'll take the crew to the moon. So let's see if we can cue the next video, please. It takes 3 days to get to the moon, and the crew along the way is going to be doing some additional, more detailed checkouts of the spacecraft. We'll ensure that we've got a good, healthy spacecraft before we leave Earth. But then, of course, this is a test flight. We want to put Orion through its paces. And then as we fly by the far side of the moon here, the crew is going to spend a day in lunar observation. So they're going to basically spend the day giving their observations on the far side of the moon, which hasn't been seen, parts of it hasn't been seen by human eyes before, so that'll be a great opportunity. And of course, they're going to take a fair amount of video and just have those observations. I will caution you that they're a long way from Earth, and signals are a little weak at that point, so we will get some video down, but the real high definition video will be post-flight when they come back. Finally, they're going to head on back home here and get ready for entry. It's a long mission. 3 days there, a day around the moon, and 3 days back. All of that to say that we have to set them up for entry successfully, right? Our one job, as Mr. Honeycutt said, is to bring the crew home safely. We need to hit the right entry interface corridor and bring them home. And once we do that, then the Orion will split into two. We'll have the CMA and the service module come off the crew module, which will then come through re-entry. And we've got a whole series of parachutes that slow down. We're going much faster coming from the moon than we are in low Earth orbit, and so we need to slow down a little bit more, and it takes more parachutes to do that. And so here we've got a video of what the re-entry sequence looks like. Of course, the crew's protected by the heat shield, and we'll go through a blackout period where we can't talk to them, and then come out the other side underneath the parachutes. Let's see, I do want to mention this is a test flight, and there's things that are going to be unexpected. I think we've prepared for those as much as we can, and we're very much looking forward to flying this mission successfully with the crew and learning what we need to on Artemis II. Moving forward and paving the road for future Artemis missions. Let's see. Next, I'll hand it over. Once the video here completes and the crew gets down safely, of course, we hand things over to Lily and her recovery team to go pick them up.
Thank you, Jeff. If you can't tell, I'm just a little tiny bit nervous. So I want to really talk to you about recovery, and I represent such a wonderful team, so bear with me. My name is Lily, and I'm the NASA Artemis Land and Recovery Director. I'm going to walk you through the process of how we will safely recover the Artemis II crew and the Orion spacecraft once they return from their trip around the moon. Within 24 hours of splashdown, we will be positioned in the Pacific Ocean within miles of the targeted recovery site, which is normally off the coast of San Diego. The recovery ship will approach the landing zone, and a team of Navy divers and in small boats will deploy from the ship into the open water. Prior to splashdown, a team from Johnson Space Center will map where the elements are jettisoned from Orion, such as the forward bay cover, the drogue parachutes, and the mortars. And this is to make sure that our boats and helicopters supporting recovery stay clear of all this debris. The divers will be the first to approach Orion, and they will conduct assessments of the air and water surrounding the capsule to make sure that it's safe to approach and help the crew exit Orion. After ensuring the area is safe, they'll open the Orion hatch and help the astronauts from their seats to a large inflatable raft called the front porch. Once all the four astronauts are on the front porch, we will tow the capsule away from the front porch, and the team will pick up from the Navy helicopters, which are deployed from the recovery vessel. 2 helicopters are going to rotate, picking up all the 4 crew members before they return to their recovery ship within a few minutes of each other. Once the crew has exited the helicopters, they're going to proceed straight to the ship's medical bay to undergo routine post-medical checkups. We expect to recover the crew and deliver them to the med bay within 2 hours of splashdown. With the crew safely out of the capsule, and in tandem, we're going to be recovering the capsule. Teams are going to work on towing the Orion into the well deck of the ship, pretty much similar to how we did that during Artemis I. The Navy divers will ensure that a system of lines are connected to the capsule to ensure that we can help tow the Orion vehicle onto the ship. When Orion is close to the ship, an additional line is going to be attached to a pneumatic winch that's inside the ship, and that's how we're going to pull the vehicle into the capsule. Once Orion is safely inside the ship, we will start making our return back to Naval Base San Diego. Depending on our distance or when we land, the Artemis II crew will either fly off the ship back to shore, or they will ride with the recovery vessel back to San Diego. Once we arrive back to shore, the astronauts are going to depart to go to Houston, while the NASA recovery team will complete some post-splashdown processing activities of Orion before we transport it back to Kennedy Space Center. Some of those tasks that we're going to do is perform all the initial assessment of the capsule. We'll remove some science payloads that need to be expedited, returned back to their original NASA center, and then we'll be ready to transport it back. I do want to take a moment to say that we want to thank our partners from the U.S. military who are supporting our Artemis recovery operations. Without them, we really could not have done that, and they have been there with us since the early days of human spaceflight. Our joint NASA, Navy, and Air Force team, we've been training for several years together to ensure we have a seamless recovery of Orion and the Artemis II crew. We had a very successful recovery of the Orion spacecraft during Artemis I, and we feel confident that through our testing and training, along with the Navy and the other collaborations that support us, we will make Artemis II just as successful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, and thanks, Lily. And I just wanted to say, you know, being nervous is just one form of extreme excitement, and I hope that you can all tell how excited we are right now. I did want to start by saying what a privilege it is to be here and an honor it is to be a part of the Artemis II team. I want to echo some of John's words earlier. That's not just our colleagues here at this table, but the thousands of people who have worked on Artemis II over the years, including you all. Thank you for being here to help us relay this information and tell this story. I have a song that I like to play often as I approach the VAB, Vehicle Assembly Building, for big events. It's the kind of song that makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck or on your arms. I'll confess I played that song this morning. because this is a very historic moment, an exciting moment. We're rolling out the integrated SLS and Orion for a flight that will carry 4 of our friends, our NASA family members, around the moon and bring them safely back to Earth. Artemis II is a test flight. It truly is exploration. There will be a number of firsts that we'll be proving out on this flight. And I like to say that during exploration, science is our toolbox for survival. With that in mind, I'm excited to present to you our Artemis II integrated research campaign, which involves activities across biology, human research, space weather research, and also some planetary geology. Our integrated campaign is designed to help unlock more time for science on future missions by minimizing crew time spent on other activities and increasing crew and support team efficiency on the science tasks themselves, all while learning how to best thrive in the deep space environment. During this flight, we will learn how the spacecraft behaves. Through our research campaign, we will also learn how we, human beings, behave in that same environment. The combination of these 2 things will help us optimize our time in future missions. We'll be flying a payload called Avatar, which stands for a Virtual Astronaut Tissue Analog Response. Basically, Avatar enables us to mimic individual astronaut organs, and Artemis II will mark the first time that these types of devices have been tested outside the Van Allen belts or away from the ISS. We will test if we can use these astronaut avatars as tools for measuring and predicting our human response to the deep space stressors. To evaluate this, scientists will compare avatar data with space station findings we've already collected, as well as with samples taken from our crew both before and after the flight. For NASA, Avatar could help inform measures to ensure crew health on future deep space missions, including personalizing medical kits for each astronaut. For citizens here on Earth, it could lead to advancements in individualized treatments for diseases such as cancer. We'll also be flying an activity called Archer, Artemis Research for Crew Health and Readiness. For the Archer study, crew members will wear movement and sleep monitors called actigraphy devices before, during, and after the mission. These wristband monitors will enable us to study real-time health and behavioral information for the crew members and help scientists study how crew members' sleep and activity patterns are affected and how overall health and performance is affected. The study will evaluate how our crew members perform individually, as a team throughout the mission, including how easily they can move around within the confined space of their capsule. We'll also measure a set of immune biomarkers. For the immune biomarker study, crew members will supply saliva samples through the flight, and they have done so on Earth and will do so when they return for comparison. Scientists will gain insights into how the astronauts' immune systems are affected by the increased stressors of the radiation environment, isolation, and distance away from Earth during deep space flights. We'll also extend a set of ISS activities to the moon called Spaceflight Standard Measures. Astronauts will collect a set of measurements spanning multiple physiological systems to provide a comprehensive snapshot of how spaceflight affects the human body. We will conduct also physiological assessments, including testing their head, eye, and body movements before, during, and after the spaceflight, and that will be compared with blood samples that are taken before and after the flight as well. As soon as possible after landing, the crew members participate in basically an obstacle course to see how quickly they can function soon after going through a gravity transition. A few days later, they'll conduct a simulated spacewalk and will do various tasks in a pressurized spacesuit again to investigate how quickly, again, they can adapt to that change in gravity. That prepares us for landing on the moon and eventually down the road going to destinations such as Mars. During the flight, we will make measurements with a suite of radiation sensors. You may remember that we've did something similar during Artemis I. Crew members will keep detectors in their pockets of their suits so that we can measure their individual exposure in real time during the flight. 2 other sets of sensors will also be placed in Orion. One will monitor radiation at different shielding locations in the spacecraft so that we can gain a better understanding of what the radiation protection does for our crew members on board. We will also be partnering with the Germany Aerospace Agency, or DLR, to provide sensors similar to what they provided during Artemis I. And the crew will deploy these around the Orion, again, to give us a comprehensive view of that radiation environment. Last but not least, a very exciting aspect to it is the ability to observe the moon. So you've heard a little bit about that already, and if we could cue up our first image here. Our crew will take time to observe the moon as they pass around the far side of the moon. Far side is the side of the moon that we never see from here on Earth. The moon will look about like holding a basketball at arm's length to them from the Orion. And if we could cue up the second image as well now, just to give another look here. Depending on when the mission launches and the final flight path, it's possible they'll see parts of the moon that have never been viewed by human eyes. All of the Apollo missions launched for the landing to occur in the early lunar morning. A lunar day includes 14 days of sunlight, 14 days of darkness. So basically, the crew that were flying around the moon all saw the same lighting conditions. So this could be a very unique opportunity to see the moon. We'll be asking them to look for things like albedo differences, variations in the grayscale that human eyes really can detect. In addition to their observations, which they'll be communicating back to the Earth, our science support teams will conduct their own test flight of a sort here on the ground, testing out how our support teams work to make sure that we can best support them when they actually go land on the moon during Artemis III and beyond. One last piece to our Artemis II science activities includes the deployment of 4 international CubeSats. Could we go ahead and cue up that image? Artemis II mission has provided us with the opportunity to deploy 4 CubeSats. Those are basically shoebox-sized payloads that essentially act as their own spacecraft once we deploy them. Our partners in Argentina, Germany, Korea, and Saudi Arabia are all partnering with NASA to take advantage of the opportunity that we have with Artemis to fly their own CubeSats. Each has its own objectives, but in general, all of the CubeSats are conducting complementary space weather measurements to the types of research that NASA's doing. So we're excited to provide this opportunity to our partners as we lead the way in space exploration and exploration of the moon. So real quick to conclude here, our integrated research campaign for Artemis II builds upon what we learned in Artemis I, and it sets the stage for successful exploration of the moon and ultimately onto Mars. Our campaign will help us understand the space weather that we'll face during future lunar missions, how to observe the moon and communicate with the support teams here on Earth, and in general, how we will react to, survive, and thrive in that deep space environment. Therefore, I like to say that Artemis II science is the science of us. Artemis II science is the science of humankind and how we'll act as we continue to press the boundaries and explore in deep space. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rachel.
All right, we'll go ahead and take questions. For those on the phone, you can get into the question queue by pressing *1. We will go around here into the room first. Please wait for the mic. And let's start here with Marcia Dunn.
Oh, hello, Marcia Dunn, Associated Press for Charlie. Given a fueling test on or around February 2nd, that is really tight by NASA standards to have a fueling tank test and then go right into a launch. Is the beginning of the February window even feasible given a February 2 tanking test? And how perfectly does that test have to go for you to make any days in the February window?
We need to get through wet dress. We need to see what lessons that we learn as a result of that, and that will ultimately lay out our path toward launch. With a wet dress that is without significant issues, if everything goes to plan, then certainly there are opportunities within February that could be achievable. Yeah.
Just quickly, are you already just hoping to get to the end of the window at this point, or are the first few days of the window even possible at this point?
I think wet dress is really the driver to that, and how it goes. It would be hard to say that you could not. I mean, we do the wet dress early in February. You're going to need a little bit of time to go look at the data, but certainly it will be the driver toward LP17 opportunities.
Okay, we'll go behind to Bill Harwood.
Yeah, hi guys. Bill Harwood with CBS News. Two quick ones. One for Jeff. I realize you guys don't have launch dates yet, like Charlie was talking about, but there's at least a chance that you could be launching Crew 12 while the Artemis II mission is underway. Is there a minimum separation you would like to see between one launch and the other? What are some of the issues you have to deal with as you've got simultaneous missions? And maybe for John, on the outside, we don't have the insights you guys have, but this whole point about counting down to this huge launch with Artemis II and then Crew 12, I mean, it almost seems like there's a rush. People that aren't involved in what you guys do might think, well, why is there such a big rush when you've got this other mission you got to get to the space station? And doesn't that kind of reflect some of the lessons from the Challenger Commission and CABE about being in a hurry to get flights off? And why is this case different from that, if that makes any sense? Thanks.
So I'll take a start. I will say this is not a rush, and I actually take quite an issue with you using that word. That's not where we're at right now, right? We are preparing to launch Artemis II. As Charlie mentioned, we're working towards wet dress. I know the agency's preparing to launch Crew 12. There's a lot of preparation going on, but there absolutely are constraints, right? We have the TDRS network to work through. We have the various launch pads. The missions, right? It's not prudent for us to put both of those up at the same time, but we also have to ensure that both of them are ready to go. Because you guys have been in the space business long enough to know that we may run into an issue, and the last thing we want to do is make a decision too early and then lose an opportunity, right? That would not be responsible of us. So we need to keep pressing with both missions. We need to ensure we're doing that at the right speed and we're looking at the right technical constraints. And then, as we get closer, either the decision will come about because the hardware's talking to us and we have something that we need to go deal with, or we'll have to pick one. But that doesn't mean we should stop preparing for either mission right now, but we need to do that at the right pace.
Let me address the second part to Bill's question. Bill, part of my job as the MMT chair is to just watch out for what you just said. We go through numerous training simulations with Charlie and her team, with Jeff and his team, and I think I've got a good eye for launch fever, and I think I've used that probably more than I would like to during some of these simulations, because I sense that some of the team needs to take it as a learning opportunity. So with that said, the agency's looking at when to launch the next crew to station, and we're going to do our job to be ready to go fly. And I'll reiterate what I said in my opening remarks. I'm not going to tell the agency that I'm ready to go fly until I think we're ready to go fly. Now, it's not totally my decision, but I'll have an input up through my boss.
Okay, we'll go here in the front.
For John and Charlie, I'm James from Channel 6, our local reporter. So building off of Marcia's question, Artemis I took 8 months from rollout to launch. So could you talk about the lessons you learned the first time through this process that makes you confident that February could be feasible?
I can certainly talk about the lessons that we learned during Artemis I launch campaign, wet dress and launch campaign. One of the things that we learned and we worked our way through was, first off, it was a brand new vehicle. And so, as you know, we had some challenges through the wet dress, first with the LOX loading and making sure that we had the loading CONOPS that we started with and the one that we ended up with were slightly different, right? And that had to do with the fact that we were using some amount of legacy hardware And we found that as we regulated the LOX pump, as an example, in our first 2 wet dresses, that if you think about having a single stage and an upper stage, and you have that piping that goes up the tower, as you regulated that pump and it slowed down, you would get some warm LOX that would fall into that fill stream of the core stage. And so we had some trouble getting to the right inlet temperatures there. Took us a couple of tries to figure that out. Then during wet dress 3, we had some issues with some hydrogen leaks, right? Hydrogen leaks. So we worked our way through that. We made some modifications to our ground plates. We changed our the way in which we loaded hydrogen, and we got through our wet dress campaign, and then we had a issue with the replenish valve on the launch attempt number 3. Where we finally launched, right? We sent a red crew out to the pad and we worked our way through that. So if I were to kind of step back from that and say, what's that biggest lesson that you learned? Well, the first one is on the lock side of things, we learned how to load. We learned how to change our ConOps for that. We're utilizing the same ConOps. Once we made those changes and we worked our way through launch countdown attempt number 1, and number 3, we used that same philosophy and ConOps for Artemis I. It worked successfully, and that's what we plan to use again. So that was a big lesson learned. The other lesson learned on the hydrogen side of things, we made some changes to that interface between the flight plate and the ground plate. We made some changes during our Artemis I campaign to improve that so that we did not have leaks where you have the flex hoses and the connections on the back of the plate. We saw very good performance during the launch countdown number 3 for that. The interface between what we call the cavity, where those plates come together, we saw some hydrogen leaks there. We learned that the way in which we loaded and the flow rates, the temperatures, the pressures have a whole lot to do with the leakage that we saw within the cavity. And so we modified that, and we were able to manage that through launch countdown number 3. We had the issue with the replenish valve. We went in and we made a modification post Artemis I to that valve, and we tested it with cryos for the replenish time frame with as many cycles as we would expect to have during Artemis II. So why do we think that we'll be successful in Artemis II? It's the lessons that we learned, right? Artemis I was a test flight, and we learned a lot during that campaign getting to launch. And the things that we learned relative to how to go load this vehicle, how to load LOX, how to load hydrogen, have all been rolled in to the way in which we intend to load the Artemis II vehicle. Now, what's new, right, for Artemis II? Well, Orion's got some new systems on board. They've got a new ECLS system. We've got the crew interface piece of this, and we have tested those things offline to ensure that, you know, they're not influenced by the cryogenic environment of tanking, but they are used in day of launch, and they have to be used in accordance with our launch countdown and that critical timing. And so we've gone through and we've done a countdown demonstration test. We did a suited crew test before we even got to the VAB. And so we've taken this incremental approach to the testing for the new systems. And so I believe that we'll be ready for wet dress. Again, we'll see. This is our second hardware build for the core stage, so we'll see how it performs. We don't have the benefit of a green run, but we believe all of the lessons that we've learned from Artemis I, we have used that countdown and that philosophy as our building blocks for Artemis II.
Okay, we'll actually go to a couple of questions from the phone. We'll start with Lauren Grush of Bloomberg.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. I'm just wondering if you can maybe walk us through the major technical checkouts that will need to take place once you get to the launch pad ahead of the wet dress rehearsal. And is there anything that you're keeping an eye on that you think could have a significant impact on the schedule, or is everything moving as smoothly as you'd like leading up to now?
So I'll take that one. The things that happen once we get to the pad. One of the first things that happens after we get to the pad, we get connected, is we'll do some crew access arm swings. That is about a day or so after we get there. Of course, the first part after we get to the pad is just getting all the connections, all the validations, getting tied back to the firing room, getting ready to power up the individual elements. And so that is something that, you know, you never want to say that's something that is routine, because you can have hardware that fails at any time. But I would say that's something that we did a number of times through Artemis I. There are not substantial changes to that. We will get into our crew module work. There is some unique work that we did not have to do during Artemis I because we didn't have all of the crew systems. We have late stow. We have other things that we have to do. We're going to power everything up, all the elements. We'll get into pad PSET. Mostly RF testing there. We've tested all these systems in the vehicle assembly building, but it's not in the RF environment of the pad. And so we'll go through and we'll do all of that checkout. We load the boosters. Again, there's some weather dependencies there, so we'll certainly keep an eye on the weather. Luckily, we're not trying to do it in the summertime when you have lots of thunderstorms, so makes it a little bit easier this time of year. There's nothing in particular through the whole pad flow that I would look at and say, you know, this is the thing that is the driver to wet dress, right? All of the work has to get done. We have incrementally tested all of this offline or in the integrated environment of the VAB, and now it's just getting out to the pad and testing those pad interfaces, that launch pad environment with the RF. I mean, wet dress is the big test at the pad. That's the one to keep an eye on. I guess if you're watching one and you say which one is the driver, that's the driver to launch. So that's the one to watch until we get to launch day.
Okay, we'll take another question from the phone, and then we'll come back here into the room. Next, we have Jackie Waddles with CNN.
Hi, folks. Thanks so much for doing this. So question for Mr. Honeycutt on the heat shield. I was curious, do you expect the heat shield to play a big role in flight readiness review or this risk assessment? Where do you personally stand on that? And then kind of on that line of thinking, just for clarity, who exactly is giving the final go for launch? Like, does this need to be a unanimous decision within the MMT, or do Jared or Amit have final say? Just some insight into that process would be wonderful. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so for the second question, Charlie does her poll, and I'm part of that poll. So I'm a small piece of that, and I do not have to have consensus from the MMT to make my decision relative to giving her my go or no go. I would like to have consensus. I'll tell you, a lot of times in our sims, we have complicated problems that aren't black or white, and so we do have varied opinions across the team. But at the end of the day, it's up to me to manage the decision that we make and send it forward to Charlie. Relative to the heat shield, you know, we started that work back when I had my old job, before I got this job, and so I was paying attention to it then, but even more so now. We're changing, and I'm going to pass it to Jeff on this in just a minute, but just from my perspective, I think we've done the work, the analysis and the testing to show that we're in good shape for the mission profile that Jeff and his team have planned. You want to add anything, Jeff?
So what I'll say is, through the testing that we've done after Artemis I and the work that we've done here on the ground, we understand the limitations of the heat shield on Artemis II, and it's incumbent upon us to fly within those limitations. So things that we've changed, right? We've changed the entry profile so that we're flying a profile that the heat shield can handle. And we're also ensuring that we launch on a day where the demands of the heat shield are lower. And so, really that turns into a range requirement to fly, not the 4,000 miles of entry that we flew on Artemis I, but the 1,775 miles of entry that we're flying on Artemis II. And so, the heat shield, yes, we understand there's some limitations with it, and so from a mission design perspective, we're making sure that we fly within those limitations, and that's how we're going to keep the crew safe. We're going to make sure that we're staying within the bounds of the hardware, and I think as John mentioned, the heat shield is being I don't want to say redesigned, but it's being updated for Artemis III to try and get back to that longer range requirement that we'll be able to meet for those future Artemis missions. But for Artemis II, of course, we've got that lower range, which is why we have fewer launch opportunities. That we're making Charlie's life a little bit harder by not having as many days we can launch on. But that's the right thing to do to keep our crew safe.
Okay, let's go here to Irene.
Thanks very much. Irene Klotz with Aviation Week in Space Technology. For Jeff and then also for John, obviously you hope to not test the launch abort system, but in case it is needed, could you kind of run through some of those scenarios and what you've trained for, what is kind of possible, what is still like areas that perhaps are not covered? And for John, what's the overall risk for this mission for the crew, and is it that risk still more for launch, or at this point is reentry equal or greater risk? Thanks.
I'll answer the second part now. Anytime you got this much energy that you're putting into a system like this and a lot of dynamic events, there is some risk. It's our job to either understand those risks and make sure that we've mitigated those in a way that we feel comfortable with and we can execute the mission. As Jeff said, though, this is a first time with crew. There's been some. We're flying a lot of new pieces to the configuration this time. All that's gone through all the reviews. All those need to work. Jeff and his team done an outstanding job developing flight rules that give us the ability to respond quickly to any kind of off-nominal situations once we leave the launch pad and then get into the mission. And then, as Jeff mentioned a minute ago, the dynamic event of hitting the entry interface and then coming back into the Earth's atmosphere is obviously one that's where you put a lot more energy into the system. So, I would say I don't prioritize either one of those over the other one, but from an overall perspective, that's just part of cheating gravity. Jeff.
So as far as launch aborts, right, we've got abort coverage, from pre-launch there when the capsule's on the pad, all the way through, core stage flight. If we were to have an issue, and obviously you're right, we don't want to have one, but if we did have one that would require the crew to take the last abort, that is an option to them the whole way through until we jettison the last. After we jettison the last, at that point, we still have aborts where Orion would separate from the ICPS and then use the Orion engines actually to perform the aborts off of the core stage. And so it's really set up such that they always have an abort option. It's going to be a fair amount of G's. If they have to ride the last, of course, the boosters will still be burning at that point when the last engines ignite and pull the Orion off the top. But it's a case where the crew will survive and we'll get them home, and we'll be able to go on and get them home safe.
Take one in the back.
I feel the excitement too. It's a great day. Greg Redfern with WTOP Radio up in Washington, D.C. Two questions. One, if you can't make this launch window by April, when would be the next one? And the second one, a little lunar science. You're shooting for a lunar full phase on the far side, but what would be your limit if you can't make that as to the lunar illumination that you'd like? Thank you very much. And light that candle.
For the lunar science, I'll say that the lighting conditions on the far side of the moon are not going to be criteria for determining when we launch. So what we have done is make sure that the astronauts are trained to provide us with observations regardless of the lighting environment. Now, I will say they have probably pretty much looked through what the options might look like, and they probably have their favorite. But again, we're going to launch when it's safe and we're ready, and we're going to do the best science that we can under those conditions.
All right, and so with respect to launch periods, rolling out, when we roll out, as you know, we do not have full access to everything at the pad. But one of the new capabilities that we did add for Artemis II is something called contingency pad access. And what that allows us to do is to go in and do a retest. It's an abbreviated retest of the flight termination system, and that plays into that 28 and 35-day requirement that we have with the range. So unlike Artemis I, where we rolled out and we had a single month of opportunity and you had to come back to the VAB to retest the FTS system, we actually have a new capability for Artemis II that allows us to stay out at the pad for 2 launch periods. So we can retest that, and you get 2 launch periods when you go out. Now, that is saying that if you don't have some issue come up that you require rollback for. So that would get us through 2 launch periods. You know, there is it's a bit of a puzzle, I would say, in terms of, you know, it depends on why you scrubbed, what kind of, you know, what you need to repair, and if you choose to roll back, and then what that turnaround time is. But we roughly, to answer your question, we have opportunities in just about every month. It does vary. The number of days varies by monthly opportunity, but it's roughly somewhere in a little less than a week. Some months it's a little less than that, maybe 3-4 days, but we do have we have opportunities every month.
Okay, we have time for just one more question here. Yes, you. Yes, you. Yeah.
Hi, Josh Dinner, Space.com. Barring any major malfunctions or mishaps, what milestones during Artemis II must go right in order to greenlight Artemis III to proceed as the program's first lunar landing mission?
Well, certainly, I would think we're going to have we'll have some things that we have to deal with, and we'll have to evaluate those and maybe do some course correction for Artemis III. But you know, in my opinion, doing the checkout of the systems with the crew on board and getting the crew home safely, that's the big milestone.
Are there any mission components like proximity operations where maybe the Orion experiences a hiccup but still is qualified for that sort of maneuverability?
You know, specific to proc stops, I think we have great confidence in our capability to model that. After all, you know, we fly other space vehicles in proc stops all the time. We're docking to ISS fairly regularly. So, you know, if we have an issue with proc stops, you know, that's something I think we'd have to understand why, right? What was the cause of the issue? And as John said, understand the hiccup. But I wouldn't say that would necessarily, you know, disqualify the systems. I think the understanding there is what's important for what occurred.
All right, and that's all we have time for today. I want to thank our participants for being here today. You can watch live views of rollout starting tomorrow at 7 a.m. as the rocket and spacecraft roll out of the vehicle assembly building. That'll be at 7 a.m. And then at 9 a.m. Eastern, we will have an opportunity to hear from NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman, as well as the Artemis II crew. You can watch both on NASA's YouTube channel. And with that, thank you for joining us.